Welcome back to our deep dive. Today we're pushing the map all the way to the edge. We are heading into territory that is difficult, it's tragic, but it is absolutely necessary to understand if we want to grasp how our systems, the ones designed to keep us safe, actually function under pressure.
Yeah, and we are looking at a very specific point on the map for this one, Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia.
Right. And if you haven't been there, you really need to picture the setting because it really is a character in this analysis. Imagine the foothills of the Canadian Rockies.
It's a place that completely defines the concept of remote.
Exactly. It's rugged, it's beautiful, and it is incredibly isolated. We're talking about a geographically isolated coal mining community. It's roughly 1,000 kilometers northeast of Vancouver.
Which is a massive distance.
It really is. It's a small town. The population hovers right around 2,500 people. It's the kind of place where, outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing, just being out in the woods, it isn't just a hobby. It's the way of life there.
And that geography is critical to everything we're going to discuss. It is not just a backdrop, because when you are that isolated, the infrastructure operates entirely differently than it does in a major city.
Right. The scale is just different.
Exactly. The medical facilities, for instance, they are scaled for mining accidents, routine care, maybe a broken leg. They are absolutely not designed for mass trauma. And the cultural context matters too. There's a very high prevalence of non-restricted firearms because of that hunting culture you mentioned.
Yeah, which makes total sense for the area.
It does. It creates a feeling of safety in some ways, a tight-knit vibe, but it also creates a massive structural vulnerability if something catastrophic were to happen.
And on February 10th, 2026, something catastrophic did happen. It's a date that changed this town forever. We are talking about a mass casualty event that resulted in 9 fatalities, and that includes the perpetrator and 27 people injured.
A staggering number for a community that size.
It really is. And it happened across 2 locations. First, a family home on Fellers Avenue, and then the local high school, Tumbler Ridge Secondary.
And honestly, those raw numbers, as horrific as they don't even fully capture the scale of the impact. You have to look at the size of the school itself. Tumbler Ridge Secondary has an enrollment of maybe 160 to 175 students total.
That's tiny. I mean, that is the size of a single grade level in a lot of urban schools.
Exactly. So when you have a casualty count like this, 9 dead, 27 injured in a school that small, statistically speaking, every single resident likely knew a victim or a responder. The impact is total.
And that is exactly why we're doing this deep dive into the source material today. The news coverage, it covered the what. They reported on the tragedy itself. But our mission today is to look at the how and the why.
Right. We are digging into a very comprehensive forensic and policy analysis titled The 2026 Tumbler Ridge Mass Casualty Event.
And this document, it's heavy. It exposes some massive cracks in 3 specific systems. We're looking at mental health protocols, firearm red flag laws, and, surprisingly, artificial intelligence threat detection.
That last one is particularly eye-opening. We aren't just recounting a timeline of a tragedy here. We're trying to distill the systemic gaps that allowed it to happen.
So let's get into it. Let's start with the context and the timeline. We've established the setting of Tumbler Ridge. And I want to emphasize again the school size. Because 160 kids means the teachers know everyone. The students know everyone.
It's an environment where anonymity doesn't really exist. Which brings us to the perpetrator, Jessie Van Rootselaar. 18 years old.
Right. And there's a specific detail about her identity in the report that we need to address clearly up front. She was legally and socially a transgender woman.
Yes, but the source material is incredibly explicit about this point. The police found absolutely zero evidence that her gender identity or any bullying related to it was the motive for the attack.
Right. The report is definitive on that.
It is. The motive officially remains unknown. But the forensic analysis roots it deeply in a mix of grievance and severe psychosis. It's crucial we don't apply narratives that the evidence outright rejects.
Agreed. So let's walk through the chronology. The analysis refers to this as the 2 scenes, because it didn't actually start at the high school.
No, it didn't. The violence began at the family home on Fellers Avenue. This was the domestic beginning of the event. At the home, she murdered her mother, Jennifer Jacobs, who was also known as Jennifer Strang, and her 11-year-old half-brother, Emmett Jacobs.
And a really chilling detail from the timeline here is that nobody knew this had happened yet.
Right. The bodies at the house weren't discovered until after the entire school shooting had concluded.
So after the domestic scene, there's the transit. The perpetrator leaves the house and walks 1.5 kilometers to the school. And she's armed.
Heavily armed. She made that walk carrying a long gun and a modified rifle.
Which brings us to scene 2. Tumbler Ridge Secondary. It's 14.20 MST Mountain Standard Time. And the speed of what happens next is just terrifying to read.
It is. The entire event at the school unfolded in roughly 2 minutes.
2 minutes. It's almost impossible to process that level of violence in that time frame.
So at 14:20, the first call comes in. The school goes into lockdown. Students are immediately barricading doors.
And then just 1 minute later, at 14.21, there's a breach.
Yes. She enters the building. The report details a shooting in the stairwell first, and then she moves into the library. And the firing is described as indiscriminate. She was hunting targets of opportunity.
Hunting, that's the word used.
It is. And then at 14:22, the RCMP arrive.
And we have to pause on that data point. A 2-minute response time from the police.
In a rural detachment, that is an incredibly fast response, and they didn't hesitate. The officers entered immediately. There was no waiting outside. They advanced straight up the stairs.
Right toward the threat.
Exactly. And as they advanced up the stairs, the perpetrator committed suicide. The event was over.
2 minutes from the first call to the end. It's devastating. And I think before we get into the forensic profile and the system failures, we need to spend some time on the human toll. The people who are lost in those 120 seconds.
We do, because reading the ages in this report, it just highlights this massive loss of potential. We're talking about 12-year-olds.
Yeah, like Abel Mwanza. He was 12. The notes describe him as a future engineer, very scientifically inclined.
And Kylie Smith, also 12, an artist. She dreamed of going to art school in Toronto.
And Tikaria Lampert, just 12 years old, described by those who knew her as a blazing light, an Energizer bunny.
And we also lost an educator, Shanda Avigana Duran. She was 39, an educational assistant just doing her job, trying to protect her students.
7 dead at the school, 2 at the home, 9 total fatalities, and then 27 injured. Which brings us to the logistics of survival, the medical response.
Right. Remember what we discussed about the infrastructure? The local clinic immediately called a code orange.
The mass casualty protocol.
Exactly. But they were overwhelmed the second the patients started arriving. You have a facility designed for primary care suddenly faced with treating multi-system ballistic injuries.
So how do they handle it? Because they did manage to save lives.
It required a massive logistical pivot. They had to call in the STARS Air Ambulance from Grand Prairie, Alberta. They actually crossed provincial lines just to get the speed and the trauma capacity they needed.
That's incredible. Crossing into a different province's medical system just to expedite the evacuation.
It was the only way. And amid all of this medical chaos, there is this one story in the report that is just, it's a miracle. Maya Gabala.
Maya's story is astounding. She is 12 years old, and the report notes she was shot while she was actively trying to lock the library doors to save her classmates.
12-year-old stepping up in the middle of gunfire.
And her injuries were horrific. Severe wounds to her head and neck.
The initial prognosis was that it was a non-survivable injury. The medical team thought she wouldn't make it.
But she did. She was put into a medically induced coma, and then there was this miraculous resilience. Eye flickers, movement.
She survived against all the medical odds. She will likely have permanent mobility issues, but she survived.
It's an amazing testament to her strength. But as we transition into the third part of our deep dive, the forensic profile, we have to ask the critical question, why was this missed?
That's the question the entire analysis revolves around. Because the perpetrator was not a ghost. She was very much known to the system.
Right. There was a profound background of instability here. The report mentions a nomadic lifestyle, moving across different provinces, and estrangement from her father.
In the severe childhood trauma, there are claims she witnessed a stepfather's suicide attempt. All of this lays a foundation of trauma.
But it goes beyond just trauma. The mental health red flags were glaring. The police had literally been there before.
Multiple times. The most significant incident detailed is an arson attempt. She attempted to burn down the family home by lighting a mattress on fire.
And when the authorities arrived, where was she?
The report says she was found sitting calmly in the yard while the house was on fire.
Just sitting there.
Yes. And this was linked to substance abuse. She was using psychedelic shrooms, DMT, which the medical assessments linked to a complete break from reality.
She's lighting fires. She's experiencing psychosis. The system must have intervened.
It did in the short term. She had multiple involuntary holds. She was apprehended under Section 28 of the Mental Health Act. She even spent weeks in inpatient psychiatric care in Prince George back in 2023.
So she was in the system, she got care.
She got acute care. And this is where the forensic report identifies the first massive policy gap: the failure to connect acute emergency holds, which are inherently short-term, with long-term risk management.
Meaning, once the immediate crisis is over, you're on your own.
Exactly. Once a patient is stabilized and no longer deemed an imminent threat, they are released. And once released, the monitoring stops. There is no continuum of care that tracks the long-term risk profile of someone who, for example, commits arson during a psychotic break.
That is a terrifying gap. So she goes back home. And this leads us to the most frustrating part of the analysis: the weaponry.
Part 4. The arsenal and the red flag loophole.
Because she didn't just go back to any home. She went back to a home with firearms.
Yes. The police recovered an unregistered shotgun, which was used at the house, and a modified rifle used at the school. But the source material points to a very specific Facebook post from August 2024.
This was posted by the mother, Jennifer Jacobs.
Right. It's a haunting photo. It shows an open gun cabinet in the home displaying at least 6 long guns and a handgun.
And one of those long guns was a Chris Vector, right?
Yes, a semi-automatic rifle. Now, the context here is important. At the time of that photo in 2024, the Chris Vector was non-restricted. It was perfectly legal to own. It was only reclassified as prohibited months later.
So the mother was a legal gun owner.
She was. She had a valid possession and acquisition license, a PAL. But here is where the system structurally failed. It's regarding Section 117.4 of the Criminal Code, the seizure and return laws.
Because the police had actually taken these guns away previously, right?
They had. During one of Van Rootselaar's mental health crises, the police seized the firearms from the home. That is the red flag system ostensibly working.
But they gave them back. Why? If the police know a person in the house is severely mentally ill and violent, why return the guns?
Because of how the law is written. The mother, Jennifer, was the legal owner. She was not the one in crisis. She petitioned to have her property returned.
And because her license was valid, they had to comply.
Exactly. The current law looks at the owner's status. It evaluates the license holder. It does not evaluate the household's risk.
So the guns go right back into a house where a known psychotic individual lives, simply because the person whose name is on the paperwork passed a background check.
You nailed it. The analysis identifies this as a catastrophic structural vulnerability. The assumption in the law is that a licensed owner will secure their weapons. But the reality is, if you share a home with someone who is violent and mentally unstable, a standard gun cabinet is not enough. The proximity itself is the danger.
It's just a massive loophole.
Yeah.
The red flag law worked in isolation, but failed in practice because it ignored the reality of the environment.
And that failure of context brings us to the digital side of this event, because the missed signals weren't just in the physical world.
Right. Part 5 of the deep dive: the digital rehearsal and the AI paradox. This part of the report is fascinating because it brings in OpenAI.
Yes. In June 2025, which is a full 8 months before the attack, OpenAI's algorithms flagged Van Rootselaar's account.
What were they flagging it for?
For using ChatGPT in furtherance of violent activities. The system detected that her interactions were violating their safety protocols regarding violence.
So the AI caught it. What did they do?
They took action on their end. They banned her account.
But they didn't call the police.
No, law enforcement was not notified.
Why not? If an AI detects someone preparing for violence, how is that not an immediate phone call to the authorities?
Because of corporate policy and legal thresholds. To breach user privacy and report to the police, the standard is usually an imminent and credible risk, meaning a specific threat with a specific date and a specific location.
I see. So because she wasn't saying, I'm going to this specific school on this specific Tuesday, it didn't meet the threshold.
Exactly. And this is the paradox the source material highlights. Artificial intelligence is incredibly good at detecting chronic ideation. It can see the long-term obsession, the planning, the gradual radicalization over months.
But the law only lets police act on immediate threats.
Right. And as the experts point out, by the time a threat is imminent, by the time the person's walking out the door with a rifle, it is almost always too late.
It's a completely reactive system facing a proactive technology. And she wasn't just using ChatGPT, she was actively rehearsing this.
The digital footprint is expensive. She was engaging in gamified violence. Using Roblox, specifically Roblox Studio, she built a custom mass shooting simulator set in a mall. She used it as a digital rehearsal space.
That is incredibly disturbing.
And it was paired with social media activity. She had an obsession with gore sites. She heavily researched the Nashville school shooter. And she had a YouTube channel where she posted videos of herself practicing tactical reloads with high-powered weapons.
Like the Desert Eagle and carbines mentioned in the report.
Yes. The digital evidence proves she was highly trained and proficient with the exact types of weapons she ended up using.
So you have the AI flagging her, you have the YouTube videos, the Roblox simulator. It's a mountain of chronic preparation.
But because it's siloed in the digital space, and because it never crossed that legal line of an imminent threat, it stayed hidden from the police until it was too late.
Which brings us to the aftermath, the fallout in the community, and this really bizarre situation with misinformation that happened right after the shooting.
The Zilly Strang incident, it's a prime example of the misinformation age we live in.
Explain what happened there, because it's pretty wild.
So, because the shooter's mother used the name Strang, internet sleuths started digging. And they misidentified an entirely innocent person living in Ontario as the shooter, just based on a similarity in names.
A person in a completely different province.
Yes. And the online mob mentality took over so aggressively that the RCMP actually had to waste vital resources during an active mass casualty investigation to publicly clear this innocent person's name.
That is just absurd, having to stop managing a crisis to correct internet sleuths.
It highlights how chaotic the immediate aftermath is, but amidst all that chaos, there was also a really profound moment of unity.
Right, the political response.
Yeah.
And the report highlights a very rare moment here between Prime Minister Mark Carney and opposition leader Pierre Poilievre.
It was striking. They both attended the vigil in Tumbler Ridge together.
And the image the source material describes is really powerful.
Right.
Rivals holding hands, flanked by First Nations chiefs.
And the rhetoric matched the image. Carney gave a speech focused on grace, and then Poilievre commended Carney's grace. It was a complete and total suspension of partisan politics.
We impartially report that, but it is certainly noteworthy to see that kind of unified front in modern politics.
It speaks to the sheer gravity of the event, and that resilience extended deep into the community itself. The phrase Tumbler Ridge Strong really took hold.
How did the community respond logistically to the grief?
They adapted their spaces. The local dinosaur museum was transformed into a grief center. Neighboring towns stepped up too. Fort St. John's sent staff down just to run the local ice rink so the kids in Tumbler Ridge had somewhere safe to go, somewhere normal to be.
That's community. And then there's the incredible compassion from the victims' families.
Specifically, Shia Edmonds, the mother of Maya, the 12-year-old survivor. She publicly expressed compassion for the shooter's mother.
Wow.
She explicitly focused her message on the need for mental health reform, refusing to give in to hate. It's a remarkable level of grace.
It really is. And her call for reform leads perfectly into the strategic takeaways from this analysis. The so what? What do we do with all this information?
The report outlines 3 distinct vectors of reform needed to prevent this from happening again.
Let's go through them. Vector 1 is digital.
Right. Tech companies absolutely need a new legal framework. They need the ability and the mandate to report chronic violent preparation. The threshold cannot just be an imminent threat anymore. If an AI detects a pattern of building weapons simulators and researching mass shooters, law enforcement needs to know.
Vector 2 is firearms.
The red flag laws have to be updated to assess the household environment, not just the individual license holder. It's a simple logic gap. If you live with a violent, mentally ill person, you cannot be permitted to secure an arsenal in that shared space. The risk is just too great.
And Vector 3 is mental health.
We need a true continuum of care, a system that tracks and supports individuals long after they leave an acute psychiatric hold. The monitoring can't just stop the moment they walk out the hospital doors.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the final summary here is stark. This event wasn't a random anomaly.
Not at all. It was the culmination of unmitigated risk factors. The AI flags, the police seizures, the mental health holds. All the warning signs were there. They were just in different silos.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on. Something for you, the listener, to mull over.
We have the technology to predict these events. The AI proved that. And we have the laws to stop them, like the red flag seizures.
But right now, our privacy frameworks and our legal definitions are prioritizing the individual's rights over the community's safety.
Exactly. The system waits until the very last possible second, until the threat is imminent before it acts.
Until the moment the trigger is pulled.
And as we saw in Tumbler Ridge, by then it's already too late.
It's a heavy realization. We encourage you to think about how these policy gaps apply to your own communities and what needs to change to close them. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Take care, everyone.